If I open up TikTok and see one more video telling me that the best way to not worry about the mistakes I'm making at work and the best way to not panic about being imperfect at work is to just let it go. It's not going to matter in 5 years, so why give it 5 minutes of your time today? If that were an option for me, I would be exercising that option. But unfortunately, I have the kind of brain where if things are not 100% perfect all of the time, I'm losing my mind. So, this is a podcast episode for those kinds of people, for the kind of people who go home with legitimate stress and anxiety from a typo in an email they sent at work, or the kinds of people who are convinced that their peers and their bosses are perfect and we are just imbeciles who can't seem to figure out how to do basic shit on our own. Hello, 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 and happy Sunday. If you are new to the show, my name is Emily Durham. I'm a principal recruiter. I've been a recruiter for over 8 years. I'm a careers coach. I'm a careers advice columnist with a reach of over 3 million across my social platforms. The interesting thing about making mistakes in life, but most especially at work, is not necessarily the mistake itself, but it's how we react to it. And how we react to mistakes is really telling of how we see ourselves, our confidence, and essentially our entire self-image. Because deeply secure people who know that they are competent and intelligent people aren't going to go home and beat themselves up over a typo in an email. They're not going to call their friend crying because they misplaced a document, because they know their value doesn't necessarily equate exclusively to their work. So if you are the kind of person, frankly, a lot like myself, who gets really emotionally attached and stressed out to failures at work, that probably says a lot about your self-concept. That probably is a clue that you tie a lot of your worth to your productivity, how well you perform in school, how often you reach out to and see your friends, the quality of your work. You are probably the kind of person that equates being the best to being valuable. When in reality, the way that we work and the way that we show up at work should be the least interesting thing about ourselves. So there is this whole body of work we need to do to unprogram our brains to make what we do for work the least interesting character quality. And that's something that really helps us detach our emotions from making mistakes. But before we even get into how to actually do that, because it's something I have worked on quite a bit in my career, with my mentors, with my therapist, and I continue to work on with my therapist, I want to share a mistake that I made, just so that we're all on the same page, just so that this is a safe space, because your girl makes boo-boos all the time. I think I might have shared this on TikTok before, but this was the biggest mistake I remember making, and maybe not the biggest in terms of like the actual incident itself, but my emotional reaction, because I have probably made worse mistakes than this since. But basically, I started recruiting maybe 7 or 8 years ago at a really large bank. I was running their student internship program and I was a coordinator. So my job was to coordinate the interviews. And I had two candidates. One was interviewing for a finance job and then one was interviewing for a marketing job. I messed up the interview details for each person. And what that means is one of those candidates got sent to another building on the other side of the city, not just like in the neighborhood, other side of the city, interviewed for a job that wasn't their job to get on a subject they knew nothing about. And the other candidate did the exact same. And I only found this out because one of the managers for the role, so the person interviewing this candidate, called me and was like, Emily, that candidate was awful. They knew nothing about finance. Like I was asking them all these data questions. They didn't know what to say. And I was like, that's shocking because they've graduated with an MBA and done this and done that. I was like, how did this end up happening? I sent the candidates to the wrong place. Can I tell you how catastrophic this was to me at the time? I was like, not only are these two candidates getting the worst experience, I wasted a whole chunk of their day. They're both going to have to re-interview for the opposite roles. I'm going to have to tell everybody I made this mistake and they're going to think I'm an absolute idiot. And now these managers and the people I work with on my HR team are all going to think I'm stupid. I cannot tell you how distraught I was. I'm laughing now, but it was not funny. At the time, it was not funny. I remember commuting home because I was living in a small town, like probably an hour and a half away from Toronto at the time, and I was working in Toronto. I was on the train home, and I was holding back tears the entire ride. I was texting my mom. I was texting my ex-boyfriend at that time. Hey, babe, Thinking of you. And my mom was like, calm down. It's not going to matter. It's not going to matter in a few years. So stop giving it so much attention. But the issue with that advice is, yeah, no shit. No shit's not going to matter in 5 years. It might not even matter in 3 days. Conceptually, I knew that. But that didn't change the fact that I was having this like heightened emotional reaction. And it was really impacting my self view, my worth. And I was really scared to go into work the next day because I was convinced, even if people said that it was fine and said it was okay, that they were actually going to look at me differently and see me as less intelligent. And that was really, really scary to me. I now know today, through years of therapy, that I have a real fear of people not perceiving me as worthy or perceiving me as intelligent. And in the context of work, the intelligence is the marker of worthiness. And instead of giving myself grace and understanding, this was a mistake, all of the greats have made mistakes, I attributed this to my worth as a person. And that literally set off a chain of like neural pathways where I have trained my brain into panicking at a level 10 for a mistake that's a level 2 every single time. And even if it's a small thing, even if someone's asking a question, questioning my work, my body's immediate reaction is to tense up, panic, freak out. And then when I realize it's okay, I slowly come down. But at that point, you are already on a 10. You are anxious. Your productivity is thrown off. You have already inadvertently made yourself feel insecure. So when you fall into traps like I did with that accident, that mistake, and it becomes a cycle of it gets really high and then you have to bring it back down with your emotions, you are creating a really scary neural pathway in your brain. And what I want to talk about is how your brain processes mistakes. So there's 3 phases in how your brain chemically processes mistakes. The first is the recognition period. Your brain has something called ACC. I can't remember what it stands for, but ultimately it is the part of your brain that recognizes something is just a little bit off. This is that aha moment of, oh shit, did I send the attachment? Oh shit, did I send the candidate to the wrong side of Toronto, Ontario? It's that oh shit moment. And for a healthy person, a person who is well adjusted, a person whose work is not their entire personality, they are going to say, oh yeah, I did make that mistake. Have a little bit of that yucky feeling, that little bit of anxiety, and they jump to the solution, which is the second part. The second thing your brain does is it evaluates the risk. Is this fixable? Is this something I can adjust? Is this something that is going to cause significant harm? Is this going to impact my career? A healthy person, their brain goes to the evaluation stage, this risk assessment stage, and says, yes, this is not great, but it is fixable and it is okay. And a healthy person then has the emotional capacity to still be productive because their body isn't on overdrive dealing with anxiety. They solve the problem and then they move on. That's the big difference. Okay, so the third part of how your brain processes mistakes actually lies in your emotional response. And a lot of that is very tied to our bodies. It's so interesting because I think people often assume that stress typically comes from your brain first and then your body. But typically, stress starts in your body. And before you even have words to describe why you're feeling how you feel, you are already in that physical fight or flight mode. One of the most important things that you can do is really think about where you fall in this spectrum of how you assess risk. Are you the kind of person that notices there's a problem in phase 1, really genuinely, authentically assesses the risk from an objective point of view, and then jumps to solution before you have an emotional response? Or are you someone where the second you see a mistake, it means it's on 10, even if it's a small mistake, suddenly it's a big mistake. And then you have this physical reaction where you're stressed out, you're not thinking clearly, you're panicking, trying to solve for it. Maybe you do solve for that error, but at that point, your body's cortisol is through the roof. You have let out oodles of that stress hormone. It's going to impact how you see yourself and how you work for the rest of the day. So with all of this happening in your brain, what can you tactically do to get better at making mistakes? Because hard truth, you are never going to not make mistakes. You will live the rest of your life making mistakes at work, with your partner, with your friends. That is the part of life that actually propels us into learning. And I know it's cliche, but when you make mistakes, you really learn things authentically. It's not until you mess up that one time, like, listen, I will never send a candidate to the wrong interview again. I will tell you that. There are so many things you learn from making mistakes if you give yourself the space to learn. And the only way you make that space is when you stop beating yourself up for not being perfect on the first go. And that's a tough pill to swallow, but guzzle, gulp, sip, grab a glass of water and swallow that pill. Because if you use every mistake as an opportunity to reinforce the negative images and views and perception you have of yourself, you are not using the mistake to its full capacity. You are not using that mistake to propel your career. You are using it to belittle yourself and reinforce your already existing self-view that you are not good enough. Because that is why you are so hard on yourself with mistakes. Okay. So the 4 things I want you to do to get better at making mistakes, and I'm looking at my little iPad as I'm doing this. Number 1, don't make the same mistake twice, as much as you can. If you're finding you're making the same mistake multiple times, you need to have an honest conversation with yourself and say, what skills am I missing that are making me fall into these patterns over and over again? Because once is an accident, twice, maybe it's another slip up. 3, 4 times, something is missing. There's a skill you do not have that you need to work on. And it's okay to ask for help and ask for support from your mentors, from your peers, even from like your friends to say, hey, I feel like I keep messing up on this. Do you have any tips, or what skill do you think I'm missing? The next time you make a mistake, I want you to slow down your body. Focus on breathing. Don't jump into solve mode. Center your body, take deep breaths, calm your body so that it can help calm your mind. It's how you're going to make better decisions. And then tell yourself, let me objectively assess the situation. Take yourself out of it and pretend you're assessing the situation as if your best friend made that mistake or someone you really respect made that mistake. Would you be as hard on them? Would it be as catastrophic if it was anyone other than you? Remember, we are hard on ourselves because it's reinforcing the negative self-view we already have. So take yourself out of your assessment process actively so that you can jump into solve mode, not emotion. It's also time that you start seeing the bad in other people. Yes, it really is. I think the hardest thing that for me was a lesson that I had to learn, especially when I was working in banking, because I just was so much younger than everyone at the time. I was like 19 or 20 in a room with these seasoned individuals, and I thought they were all so much smarter than me, and they were. But I was also convinced they didn't make mistakes. Like everything they did was perfect. It was me who kept dropping the ball and messing up. The second I started taking those people off of the pedestal, I realized they make mistakes too. They are not better than me. We are both just learning. Everyone is continuing to learn. The CEO is making mistakes, but the CEO makes a mistake, learns, and keeps it moving because they know they are important. They know they are intelligent. You need to get to that same mental headspace as the CEO, and you have to take people off of their respective pedestals and notice their mistakes more so you notice your own mistakes less. And lastly, I want you to make better mistakes, like better mistakes. There's a concept in tech that I've really enjoyed working on. It's called failing fast. And basically, it's the concept that when you release a product, you already are going to anticipate it's not perfect on the first release or even an update. Like you're going to have bugs, things that could be better, UI that could be better. The goal is for you as a team to fail quickly so you can correct the mistake and then deliver the best product possible in the shortest amount of time. And sometimes that means the product you release is only 80% of the way there. It's something called a minimum viable product. Like what's the minimum product we can release that will still work and delight our customers, but maybe isn't perfect, because the best learning comes from our customers telling us what they need and what will actually help them. So adopt that mindset in your life. What is the minimum viable product? What is the least thing, the least level, lowest level of the thing that you need to do in order to get it done so that you can quickly learn from it and iterate? For example, if you're working on a presentation, put together the full presentation, share it for initial feedback with your boss and say, here's my working draft, anything you want me to add. They might call out things that you need to completely overhaul that would have taken you hours, that you would have only found out the day before the presentation. If you change your mindset from I don't want to fail to I hope I fail small and fast instead of big at the end, you save yourself time and you actually take on like an iterative mindset versus a fixed mindset. And that is one of those other things that makes it very healthy to get feedback and make mistakes. Now, if I could sit down with my 21-year-old self and tell her one thing coming from the 28-year-old career coach version of me, it would be that the mistakes you make are actually not that significant. What is more significant is how you respond. What is more significant is how you overcome, and it is the ability you have to emotionally regulate. And most importantly, how much of these mistakes that you make at work are you allowing to seep into your weekend? Are you allowing to seep into how you see yourself for the next 3 or 4 days? I really hope that this episode was helpful. And if you watched this video and enjoyed it, let me know. I'm more than happy to keep posting these video as well as just like standard audio. But I absolutely adore you. Thank you so much for being here. And I will talk to you next Sunday.